Hi friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge University, which I use that name kind of facetiously. This is not an academic kind of presentation, and I'm not an expert. I'm an amateur knife enthusiast, but amateurs can have quite a lot to say as well. For example, think of the Olympians. They're amateurs, except for now they've allowed baseball and, well, maybe not baseball yet, but basketball and several other sports, hockey. They've allowed the professionals into the Olympics. But generally speaking, the Olympians, they're the best at their game. And when they're no longer at the top of their game, that's when they become professionals. It's kind of funny. So this is not a professional presentation. I'm just a knife guy who likes knives, and I think I've got something to say. I've learned an awful lot about knives over the years, and I am still learning more. And that's the kind of perspective I want to get at this video about sharpening and about edges with you. That kind of perspective I'm taking. And hopefully you can have the same perspective back at me. If I make mistakes, feel free to correct me. But remember, even in every single field of study in the world, experts disagree with one another. So, of course, amateurs can disagree with one another as well. And it's not about being right, it's about learning more. I've learned quite a while ago, although I'm not always of the right frame of mind, but I've learned that once I start thinking that I'm right and they're wrong, then I've shut myself off to learning more. And that's a sad place to be in. So hopefully you're also in that place where you're willing to learn more. I'm still willing to learn more. But since none of us have totally arrived, and I'm not a metallurgist or nothing, all I want to do in this video is share some information I have. And, recognizing I might be wrong in some areas, and I'm willing to learn more. So hopefully you are too. Feedback, if you want to give me feedback down below, that's great. I listen to all constructive criticism. If it's, harassing type of feedback, just like in any of my other videos, I just delete those comments, and that's very rare. It's very, very rare. I haven't done it in at least 6 months, deleted anybody's comments. But, I want this environment, this channel, to be a very positive thing, and it has been so far, and I'm sure it'll continue to be that way. Now, many times I've been asked about edges, how to sharpen right, how to sharpen best, what kind of edge should I put on, what angle should I put on that edge, what angle is the best angle, and so many questions. I'm not going to be able to answer them all, but I'm going to give you my approach to cutting instruments, specifically knives, folding knives and fixed blade knives, kitchen knives, EDC knives. They all have the same general principles. And that's what I'm going to try to talk about in this video. So if that's the kind of thing you're interested in, stick around. The video is coming at you right now. Now you've noticed this video is long. I make no apologies for it. I do talk a little bit slowly, so down just below this corner, if you're on a PC, on a computer, I should say, on a browser, there's a little icon that's the shape of a gear. Click on it, choose 1.25 or maybe even 1.5 as the playback speed. You'll still hear everything I say in a speed that you can probably follow, and that'll make the video play faster, and it'll be done sooner, and you won't miss anything. So maybe try that, and hopefully the content of this video will help you out. I've been asked to make more videos about, edges and how to determine what edge, that kind of stuff, for quite a long time. And like I said in the intro, you might find some points where you disagree with me, and that's great. You can also email me at canadiancuttingedge@gmail.com if you've got any questions or comments. I've spent an awful lot of time working on this video, and if you want to help out this channel, help me out financially for what I do, what the information I provide. I put in an awful lot. So if you get something out of it, maybe you want to help support the channel, go to patreon.com/CCE, and you can help out that way. And I like to reward the people that help me out as well. And I give away knives every single month to my Patreon supporters. How to sharpen is a big question. There are people that swear by hand sharpening. That's the best method. And you can see all kinds of videos about hand sharpening. And I'm not against hand sharpening. I just can't do hand sharpening very well because I've got arthritis in my hands and it's getting more painful all the time. And hand sharpening requires a lot of hands-on work, obviously. And but it's a very rewarding thing. If you're good at hand sharpening, I say more power to you. It's a little more budget friendly to hand sharpen. You can get all the stuff you need for a low price, but you can get the stuff you need to use guided systems for a very low price as well. I'm going to be reviewing my LANSKY sharpening system pretty soon, and that's $50 US, often less, $30 US, to get a decent LANSKY guided sharpening system. Of course, the better the guided sharpening systems cost more. And so I've got TS Prof, I've got one of their sharpening systems, I've got like 4 or 5 Hapstone sharpening systems, and I've tried all the other ones like Wicked Edge and Apex Pro. The list just could go on and on and on, and I'm just not going to spend time doing that. But what edge do I choose? What angle do I choose? That's an important question. And I want to look at some of those things. Now, what are the factors that are involved in getting the best angle? I'm not going to say the right angle, but the best angle for what you're going to be doing and for the knife that you have. There's 3 main goals that I'm going to say that I always work towards. One goal is, and most people have this goal, they want the sharpest edge possible. Another goal that's very important that a lot of people don't think about is they want the most, or you should want, a durable edge. A sharp edge that's going to last. That's important, durable. A third thing is a lot of people want an edge that looks the best. The pursuit of the mirror edge is a pursuit that a lot of people have, and there's nothing wrong with that pursuit. It just might not be right for every knife. Well, actually, I'm totally convinced that it's not right for every knife. But you still want to get the best looking edge for whatever knife you have. But that's the third goal. The first 2 are the most important, in my opinion: sharpness, durability. Now, what factors are at play to accomplish those goals? Well, again, I think there's 3 main factors involved. The first one is the type and quality of the blade. So I'm talking about the blade steel, the type of steel that's used for the blade, and how well that steel has been manufactured, and how well that blade has been heat treated. Those are very important. HRC is one of the factors that's involved in that. That's the Rockwell hardness. Actually, there's a whole number of different ways of measuring the hardness. Most knife guys, especially amateurs, and most knife producers are generally going by the Rockwell C measurement. That's the standard in the industry right now, and it has been for a while. And so the hardness of it is important, but there's other factors involved that metallurgists talk about, and that is how fine or how coarse is are the grains of metal inside the blade. It's not just one solid, homogeneous mineral inside a knife. There's all kinds of things going into play. There's a number of different ingredients in there, but it's not just the number of ingredients, it's the size of those particles of those ingredients. How fine are the carbides? The carbides are generally the hardest part, the part that does most of the work. How big are they? How small are they? It makes a major difference. Powdered steel, very briefly, powdered steel is a steel that they get molten, so they get it in a liquid state, and then they spray it like a mist. Think about those wands that you use to wash your car when you go to car wash. The manual ones, you got the trigger and you spray and a very fine mist comes out. Imagine that fine mist as steel, liquid molten steel. The finer the mist, it makes tiny little particles, and then those particles then get put into making a blade. And so they're very fine, so the carbides in there are very small. The smaller the carbides are, the better it is in terms of having a more durable edge and it's easier to sharpen, not as in it's easier to get a sharp edge, it's easier to get a consistent edge all the way across. And that's not all the factors. So that's just the powdered steel is better because everything's smaller. Okay, that's one thing. The type and quality of the steel, including the heat treatment, including the shape of the steel, the shape of the blade, and the type of the edge that you're going for. The second main factor is what type of media are you cutting? What is this knife going to be doing? It's going to be cutting what? Is it going to be vegetables? Is it going to be meat? Is it going to be wood? Is it going to be cardboard? Like what are you going to be cutting? That changes how you're going to make your edge, because certain edges perform better on certain types of media, certain types of materials. They're all different. And so you need different edges, at least for the best cut. You need different edges for each different material. Now, nobody's going to do that. So there's always compromise involved to get a good edge that will work for most of the stuff that you do with that knife. There's a third factor that's very, very important that almost nobody ever talks about on EDC videos or other knife review videos, and that's the skill of the guy holding the knife or gal holding the knife. How well a knife will perform has a lot to do with this and the brain that's behind this. It's not just about this. Now, if somebody knows what they're doing, they can take a knife and they can do a whole lot better job cutting than somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Like a chef who's been cutting in the kitchen for his entire life can not only cut faster, but he can get more consistent cuts. He can get every carrot sliced the exact same thickness, well, relatively exact, than somebody who's never done it before and they get in the kitchen for the first time and they start going at it. Never underestimate the skill of the user, and that needs to influence the edge as well. There's no sense in getting a super perfect edge for a person who doesn't even know how to use it. It's just a waste of time and effort. Okay, so that's the factors that are involved. Now let's discuss how to get the sharpest edge. What do you need to get the sharpest functional edge? Now, I'm not talking about necessarily the sharpest possible edge. I'm talking about the edge that is the best edge for that use, for that quality of steel, for the media that they're cutting, and for the user. How do you get the best edge for them? I don't have a firm answer for that because all those factors make for a different edge. Now, I'm talking about not the best possible edge in the laboratory, however you want to say that word, or for industrial machines or in a commercial setting. I'm basically talking about, the home user who's, either skinning an animal or, doing some work with some wood in a campsite. Those are the kinds of people that we're talking about, and everybody in between. The guy who carries a knife because he needs a knife on his person for whatever reason, or, the guy who just likes having a generalist kind of blade shape for doing all kinds of different things, which this is a blade shape that's very generalist, EDC, if you will. Now, how do I decide what angle to put on my knife? Now, it sounds like I haven't given you any answers yet, but stick with me. We're getting closer to the answers, or some answers. How do I decide what angle to put on the edge? Now, the rule of thumb has been for quite a while for an EDC knife that's everyday carry, so a knife that that Joan and George both carry when they go out, either in the city or going to town or just out and about. It's generally agreed 20 degrees per side is the accepted norm. But what happens if they've got a premium steel as compared to, well, here's a premium steel. This is Nitro V on here. So a premium steel versus, a cheaper steel. Like this is just, I think this is 440. I think that's what this is. Two very different ends of the spectrum, a premium steel and a low budget steel. would you put the same edge, the blade shape is somewhat similar, but let's imagine this knife that I've got two of them, one in Nitro V and one in 440. Would I put the exact same angle on the edge for both of them? Well, probably not, because this steel is going to wear down. The edge is going to get dull quicker. You're going to get, depending on what you're cutting, you're going to damage the edge much sooner with 440 than you would with a Nitro V. And so you can take this steel and make a much more narrow edge grind than you could with this one. And this one would still stay sharper longer doing the exact same work. So that's important information. Chef's knives, for example, most chef's knives are 15 degrees per side or less, 12 degrees, sometimes even 11 degrees, 10 degrees. Those finer ones get much more or less common. You need to have really good steel for that. And then also, that 10 or 11, 12 degree per side angle in a kitchen isn't going to be used for cutting, really rough stuff. It's not going to be used for cutting sugarcane, for example. It's going to be used for cutting lettuce, things like that. Some more significant factors at play. It's important how you use the knife. Not just how, sharp the knife is or what you're cutting, but I come back to that point, the person, how you use the knife. Why did I make that a separate point? I'm not sure. I've already said that. Another factor, especially chef's knives use, is they use a knife steel. Let me get one to show you so you know what I mean. I can't find my knife steel right now, but I have one of these handy, and I wanted to talk about this as well. A knife steel is very different than a ceramic rod. A knife steel is not just good for chefs. It's the classic image that you've seen in a lot of movies and on TV where a chef has got a knife steel and he's going back and forth on the knife steel. That does not sharpen a knife blade. It retrues up an edge. So what that means is as you're using a knife, this is a bad example. Let's imagine this is a kitchen knife and it's almost big enough if it was like twice as high. That edge right there, over time, when you're cutting things, if you're looking just at the very edge of the blade, and imagine this is the edge of the blade right here, it gets curled over just a little bit. And then if it gets curled over just a little bit, it's not going to cut as efficiently as if it's straight up and down. And so what a knife steel is intended to do is it takes that curl and it forces it back straight. And the blade goes across on both sides and gets trued back up again. Now, knife steels are actually very good just for everybody, not just for kitchens. Instead of sharpening your knife, you might just need to give it a bit of a truing up, or a ceramic rod. It does a very good job of just taking off a very tiny bit of steel on the top. So imagine that, it's curled over a little bit or whatever, and, you just want to actually take that off instead of trying to straighten it out. Maybe you just want to, well, for whatever reason, you use a ceramic rod very often for that same kind of job, and you use it very much the same way. I've got videos about this, so I'm not going to talk about it in detail. But if you've got one of these, that'll change when you sharpen. And if you've got a steel rod, that'll also change when you sharpen, because you can do maintenance that doesn't require sharpening the knife to get it very usable again. So imagine you've got these. Hopefully you do. This one's actually a LANSKY, not too expensive, and it's a very good choice. Another thing is a strop. You can get a leather belt kind of strop, or you can get leather or other materials put onto a piece of wood, so you got a flat strop. Now, I've talked about strops before. That's another way to get that edge, let's say, bring that edge back to that final little bit of perfection at the end without having to sharpen your blade again. That's why you see, in movies, you see the old kind of straight razor. The barber's taking it and he takes his knife and he goes flapping it back and forth on a piece of leather. And all that does is it trues up that edge, cleans up that edge. It does over time take off a very, very tiny bit of steel, but it just makes that edge pristine again. So that's another thing, about maintaining the edge so you don't have to sharpen again, but that doesn't tell you what angle to put on it. And I know I might be giving you more questions in this video than answers, and I apologize for that if that's how you feel. But hopefully you're learning something. But the better your questions, then the better answers you can come to later on. Like the better questions you ask, the more you will learn when you finally get those answers. I'm going to try to give some answers in the last half of this video. In general, most of the people that are watching this video, we're talking about guys who carry knives for EDC, everyday carry. So you want a knife that you're going to carry on your person, just regularly in your pocket or whatever, and you want to be able to take it out to do those everyday kinds of tasks. Maybe it's opening a package. Maybe, it's, skinning an apple that you're going to eat at lunch, or cutting it in half or something. All kinds of little things, cutting off, a stray fiber on some clothes. 101 different things that you can use a knife for. Or for that emergency situation, it's not that common, but, you see an accident happen on the road in front of you, and a car ends up in a ditch that's full of water, and, there's a chance that that person in there might drown if they don't get out right away, but their seatbelt's jammed or something, and you got a knife, and you can cut that loose and, save a person's life. That's not every day, but it is a possibility that could happen almost any day. It's going to be very rare, but that's one of the reasons I carry a knife, because it could happen. And so you want a knife that can do all those kinds of things, generally speaking. And very often an EDC knife is a folding knife. Now, you don't need a high-end premium steel EDC to get all of those jobs done. If you're going to be cutting all day long, it's better to have the premium steel. But your basic, this is D2. Ganzo is the company that makes this knife. They also make a whole bunch of stainless steel knives out of 440C. Those are both D2 and 440C are budget steels. They can get the job done when you need to get the job done, and you can cut for quite a while before they go dull. But, it's not the longest lasting edge on those kinds of things. But this is the average. This is sort of the norm of what most of us are talking about when we're talking about the knife that we're going to be sharpening. So let's try to maybe focus a little bit on this for a while. So what type of knife edge is best? I see a lot of EDC knives have serrations on them. Generally, the serrations are, from the heel, they go usually up about 1/3 of the way. Are serrations better? Should I get a knife that has serrated edge? My general rule of the thumb answer is no. I have almost, well, I might have one. I just don't have knives with serrated edges, because I find that a very good straight edge, and I know people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine, cuts just as well for any media, or better for any media, than a serrated edge does. Very few exceptions. Maybe bread is one of the exceptions. A bread knife is generally serrated. But I often use, a straight edge knife when I'm in the kitchen to cut bread, and it cuts very, very well. Serrated edges, people tend to think of them as, sort of saw teeth, to cut through stuff. But the thing is, I'm not cutting through a tree. I'm cutting through, daily EDC stuff. And I find that a very good straight edge can do everything that a serrated edge does, and a whole lot more. So I don't want to sacrifice 1/3 of my knife to having a serrated edge that might be better for, less than 1% of the stuff that I'm going to be cutting. And so I always say, and that's my rule of thumb, and you might disagree, and that's fine, a straight, flat edge is going to be the knife edge that you want. Now, how about a convex edge versus a V-grind? That's what this is. This is V-grind, a flat edge on the side. This knife had a convex edge when I got it, and sword knives, I like sword knives an awful lot. almost all other budget knives come with a convex edge, and that's because Brian, the owner, believes that convex edges are best. There's YouTubers that get a lot of viewers. These two guys from the Netherlands, they swear on convex edge being the best edge, and their reasoning is that it has more support of the edge because it's rounded over. To me, that doesn't make sense because, well, let's take a look at some examples that I have here. Here's your standard EDC style knife. Here's the main bevel, and here's the 20 degrees per side, and then there's the tip of the edge. Here's another knife. This is sort of the way Mora does most of their knives. They're Scandi knives. They've got edges a lot like this. So you've got, you know, a thick flat blade, and then you've got a main bevel, and that's what we'll call this edge here. That's this shiny part right here, or the part that looks darker on this image on the video right now. That's this part, and then at the very tip of the edge, they get sharpened again, and I found most Moras are around 22 degrees right here. And this angle here, this main bevel here, is at about 12 degrees. Now again, there's going to be most people that say a true Puko is just that 12 degrees right to the cutting edge. And that's fine. Or, you know, a common chef's knife, 15 degrees per side. Or a convex edge has this flat part here. It gets a little bit wider and sort of rounded. If you're just looking at the tip of my finger, you know, it comes rounded before it comes back. And so they think there's more steel supporting the edge. The thing is, you're not cutting with this. 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 You're cutting with that tiniest bit of purple right there. And this is a zoomed in, tremendously zoomed in edge. You're cutting with that. And no matter what type of grind you have, that tiny spot on the end has the same amount of support. And that is, the only way to get more support there is to get a wider angle. And when you get too wide of an angle, then you've got, you know, it's either flat at 90 degrees per side, you know, and at 45 degrees per side, you know, it's still a very wide angle to push through something. It's 90 degrees right here. That's 45 degrees per side. You know, or, you know, 30 degrees per side, 20 degrees per side. So the smaller you get on that angle, you know, the little bit, tiny bit less support there is right at the very end. But honestly, if you think about it at the very, very zoomed in cutting edge part, it really makes very little difference if it's convex or not. And I know people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. You can give your reasons for disagreeing, and, you know, go ahead and put those down in the comments below. Just do it in a nice way, and I'll let those comments stay up forever. And so I've been using this knife a fair bit. This is that sword. And since I put a V-grind on it, my performance of use with this knife is higher. Now, think back to all the things I've said so far in the video. One of those factors might be my skill. Maybe I'm just better with a V-grind than I am with a convex grind. Could be. I don't know if that's the main factor that makes me like a V-grind better than a convex grind or not. There's too many things involved to be able to say to say exactly why I like a V-grind better. But I do. I do a V-grind for everything. I don't like convex edges that much. And I like to get the smallest angle possible. This is a standard EDC knife. Are there any rules of thumb? Yes. A standard EDC kind of angle with a budget steel, I think 20 degrees per side is generally the best performing edge that you're going to get. So that's, let me see, what have I got here? Here we go. This knife is made with 9CR18 MOV. It's a budget steel, and I put this edge here at 20 degrees per side, and it performs very well that way, and it's a good knife. This is VG10. Now, VG10, some people love it, some people hate it, but VG10, is a little more, it has better edge retention than a lot of other steels. And so then the edge that I put on here, is finer. It's more like 17 and a half, 18 degrees per side, because I found that VG10, the edge won't deteriorate more quickly at 17 and a half degrees per side than it does at 20. They last pretty much the same. So why not get the finest edge possible? Because the more narrow the edge is, it's not going to make this tip of the cutting edge last longer. The thing that it's going to do is, if you look at these two right on top of each other, whatever I'm cutting through, this can go through it more easily than this can, because it's more narrow. It doesn't have to, push it out of the way. Now, very soft materials, like if you're cutting lettuce, it really makes no difference which one of these two angles you're cutting into, because it just folds away. But if you're cutting through something thicker, like let's say a watermelon rind, that can push through a watermelon rind more easily than that if the tips are exactly identically sharp one to another. So does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. So what you want to do is, the better the steel is, and now I can't give you just a long list of steels and what angles they go to. Some people try to do that. I don't have a list like that available. I might provide some other people's lists. I've got a sheet that I've got online. The document that I'm using for the basis for this video, I'm putting it online. There's a link down below so you can read it. And maybe on that sheet at the bottom, I'll put different steels, different angles that people like. But my point being, the higher end the steel, the better performing steel you have, the finer the angle that you can put on it for most users and for most materials that you're cutting. So those three factors: the material that the blade is made from, the material that the blade's going to be cutting, and the user's skill will help you determine, what angle you're going to put on that blade. And that angle is not going to be the same for everybody, because you've got that one factor, the user, which changes. Different users need different kinds of edges. Some users, let's even just say in the kitchen, and let's say you've got a cutting board, the same cutting board for everybody. Some users are going to slide that knife across the cutting board more than others. They're going to bang the cutting edge into the cutting board harder than other users. And that's going to, have a negative effect on the cutting edge, more so than somebody who's able, with practice and skill, learn to cut through the material that they're cutting and not get that edge into the wood as much. That edge will last longer. So all those three factors are involved. So finally, what's the best steel to use? I say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't need the best steel. You just need the best edge that you can put on whatever steel you can afford. So yeah, get the higher end steels that you can afford, whatever edge you can afford. But if all you can afford is knives that have, like 9CR18 or even 8CR13, hopefully you can afford something better than 440. 440C is great compared to 440. 440A is much different than 440C. 440C is a good budget steel, but if you can just afford 440, then you need to look more and shop more, because there's a lot of knives that have, Ganzo, for example, that make a lot of knives for a very low price, under $20 US, with 440C and D2. So chances are very, very high that you can afford good budget steel, and then you take that good budget steel and you put on, the best 20-degree edge that you can, which means you might need to buy, you should buy the best sharpening equipment that you can afford. But if you're a guy who can spend, let's say, $50 on knives regularly, you buy $50 knives on a regular basis, I would suggest that you stop buying knives for a few months and get a $200 sharpening system. And the best possible edge on the knife means that you don't have to sharpen as often, which means you don't have to remove as much steel, which means that knife is going to last a whole lot longer. Plus, you're going to be a whole lot happier with a super sharp edge, not only for your own cutting and performance, but let's admit it, us guys, we've got egos and we like showing off how sharp of an edge we can make. And so you can do a little bit of that. You can do a little bit of your own ego stroking, but you might need the best sharpening system. Well, you do need the best sharpening system that you can afford to be able to do that. But even if you get a very high-end sharpening system, you still need, just like on the cutting edge, you still need the best that this guy can do with that sharpening system. So learn to use your sharpening system very well. That's my suggestions. I know this video is long. I should just summarize this up now and end this. Steel composition, it's important. Get the best steel you can. If you can buy powdered steels, that's great because the size of the components on the inside are smaller. Powder steels are great. The steel hardness is a factor. How well the edge is sharpened is a factor. The media that you're cutting is a factor. The skill of the cutter. And then, don't forget the edge maintenance before sharpening. That's important. There's so many factors that are so important with cutting that you need to cover them all. And this video it's a long video and it doesn't give you a lot of specific answers, but hopefully you now have better questions to ask. Hopefully I've helped you a little bit. If I haven't helped you at all, sorry about that. If this video has helped you, please consider supporting my channel. Thank you so much for liking this video, sharing it with other people, and don't forget to download the copy of the document so that you can read it and take your time to think through it and ask me good questions if you want to, and I'll try to answer them. I will answer them as best I can. So I appreciate you guys. You mean a lot to me, and I try to give you the best I can. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, always cut towards your chum, not your thumb.